Talk Radio. You're in to all things music.
May the best brand win with Scott Robertson's Music Biz Marketing Strategies. Now, here's your host, Scott Robertson.
Hey, everybody. Happy Friday. You are tuned to May the Best Brand Win on Intertalk Media, the undisputed leader in music biz talk, and I am Scott, your host, and a man who was planning to donate all of his leftover Halloween candy somewhere, but I pretty much just ended up eating it, and that's a sad story. And with me in the studio is a man who is never far from the proverbial candy jar, Paul B. How's it going, Paul? And do you still have Halloween candy left over?
I didn't get any Halloween candy. But and I don't know if you were going to cover this in one of your segments anyway, but I saw this story. I forgot, maybe it's New York? I forget where it was. There's this machine where you could exchange your crappy candy for all Reese's peanut butter cups.
Nice. Now we're starting to think.
Yeah.
Now society's at the part where we're starting to use that noodle and think. I like it.
Finally,
I like that idea.
All that technology is paying off.
And we're going to add that to winning this week, I guarantee.
Yeah, I think they did some kind of a poll where like most people would rather have peanut butter cups as their Halloween candy of choice than any other.
Oh, that's magical. Yeah. That's absolutely. I love stuff like that. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah, we always buy too much Halloween candy, and then we didn't get as many trick-or-treaters this year, and so then we were kind of stuck with it. And now, so when I say I have my Halloween candy, it's like all this leftover candy, and it's like
maybe I'll go see your show today in San Clemente. If you bring a bag of candy, maybe I'll come check you out. Have a couple of beers, maybe a bag of candy.
Yeah, that's not creepy at all, by the way. Here's the bass player at the stage and go, "Hey, do you want some candy? How you doing? Hey, you want to? I can play Freebird. You want some candy, little girl? Come on over here." Nice. Well, about me real quick. So I run a public relations firm called Robertson Communications, and it's here in lovely South Orange County. If you want to reach me, here's how you do it. Scott at robertsoncom, 2Ms like communication.com. The website is www.robertsoncom2ms.com. And, of course, as will come as no surprise, on social media, the Twitter handle is at robertsoncom, 2Ms. And Facebook.com/RobertsonCom. You pretty much type that in. You're going to find us somewhere out there. And that's where we post a lot of results there, which is nice for our clients. We generate a lot of public relations results for people. And rather than post them on the website, I get that from people sometimes. They're like, well, you don't post your results on the website. It's like, it's too hard and I can't keep up because we generate a bunch of stuff. So I put it on social media because I can do it faster. And that's why I do it. So anyway, that's where you're going to find the results. Anywho, welcome to episode 103 of The Big Show, which I call Designing with Your Feelings. And my guest today is a solution-oriented leader with 20-plus years experience in business consulting and project management. Her expertise includes psychology, human behavior, and strategic development while advancing business innovation. She's got a successful track record of advising clients about emotional intelligence-centered design through behavior analysis in order to increase engagement and revenue. We're going to talk about a lot of mind stuff today, so welcome to the show, Leila Entezam. Hi, Leila.
Hi.
How you doing? Welcome to the show.
Excited to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Absolutely. So I want to start off, I'm excited about this topic. I'm excited about talking about, emotional intelligence and how it relates to design. Regular listeners to the show know that I'm a big fan of using all the emotional cards that you can when designing a message, which we push out in a number of ways. When you do storytelling with public relations, you got to paint with every color, and emotion is certainly one that we need to explore and discuss and figure out, because that's really a lot of the real stuff. But before we get into all that fun stuff, why don't you give us your life story and go? No, just give us a little bit of a synopsis of kind of who you are and why you're here today and all that fun stuff.
I'll give you the super short version. First of all, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. I was born in Iran. I spent most of my life in Southern California. I have an undergrad degree in neuroscience, I have an MBA. I spent the next 20 plus years in all aspects of business. I also have a master's in counseling and psychology. I'm a licensed clinician. I do that. I keep a very small private practice just as a way to exercise my feeling muscles. I have a passion for what moves people, in particular in the tech and innovation space, how to get people to feel stuff so that they will do stuff. And so I help companies do that.
Nice. And I like the way you explain that too. In that, I mean, you have all these advanced degrees, but then you use the word stuff. So you're kind of like me. You're like, how can I explain this to Scott's audience? And Scott's a bass player. How can I explain this to Scott and speak slowly enough so that the bass player will understand what it is I'm trying to say? If I was a drummer, you wouldn't be able to have this conversation at all. You'd be like, I beat stuff. Stuff beats and makes noise, loud beating. Right. Loud, but bass players, you're moving up the evolutionary hierarchy just a hair. So
nice.
I'm
moving up in the world.
There you go. So you and I met on LinkedIn, which is where all people meet in a non-creepy professional fashion. It was awesome. And you, like me, you want to get more companies out there using emotion in their marketing and specifically in their design. So talk to me about how this is being received out there. Do people understand what you're talking about at all, or are they just like, me want to send message to people multiple times, me send 50 times?
So I would say it's 3 buckets. Some people just totally don't get it. And even if I explain it to them, some people, once I have a conversation, I give them a couple examples. They say, oh, yeah, I can see, that makes sense. And then some people, just by sort of, getting a first glance at it, reading a sentence about it, are totally on board and they totally understand it. But I definitely think that emotions and emotional intelligence, EQ, continues to be a growing topic, which is great because that lets me have to explain less.
Yeah, you know what? Just for everybody who doesn't quite know, why don't you tell us what you mean by emotional intelligence centered design? Your phrase there. So, what do you mean by that?
So EQ is essentially stands for emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is some of those soft skills like empathy, collaboration, communication, and the ability to inject some of those emotions into your engagement with people. So EQ-centered design is designing, whether it's your product, your marketing campaign, your platform, designing it in a way that is sensitive to emotions and how to create emotions, or what emotions you are creating. Is that in alignment with what you're trying to do? Essentially making things more feeling-based than just data-based.
Nice. Absolutely. So can you give me an example of maybe one of your clients that's really doing this and rocking it out?
So I wonder if I could give you a focus area rather than a particular client, and tell me if this is of greater value to you. But there's a lot of people I work with that seem to express a great area of clarity for them in us working together. Seems to be from truly understanding what their product offering is once we work together. So being able to understand what's the feeling that they're trying to address or create, or how to communicate that impactfully. And so I see that come to fruition a lot as they inject EQ into their marketing, their product, their platform. So rather than, what's a specific client, I would say what's a specific area where I see a lot of impact, and that would definitely be one of them. Getting greater clarity on your message and the feelings that are behind it, and what emotion you're really addressing. And so that's pretty great to see.
All right. Is Dunkin' Donuts one of your clients? I just have to know.
No, they are not.
They're not. They're not.
No, they are not.
I just wanted to see if because they're doing some soul searching right now, and they. I mentioned on the show a few weeks ago that they're dropping the donuts. They're going with just Dunkin' because they don't want it, need it, whatever, and they're shortening that sucker, and I was just curious if there was any emotion behind that, because maybe people were like, I have positive emotions and I want donuts, and yet donuts are bad for me, especially, in California. Everything's pretty health conscious and everything. So maybe they like, if Dunkin', they're like, if it doesn't say donuts, then maybe there's like less shame to go in there or something. I was just thinking there might be something like that. I'm just curious.
Maybe, and I think maybe too, just simplifying. That's such a trend: simplifying design and simplifying, your message and your name and all of that. I think together, and so I wonder if that's an opportunity for them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, you and I are kind of cut from the same cloth, because the first thing I do with any new client is we do a messaging session, and we really dig deep into those emotions, and we try to find a place to anchor the brand in emotion, right? And I have all kinds of I get all kinds of looks, goofy looks, for me, and they're like, because people want to jump right into tactics right away, and I say, no, we should really work on the messaging and this kind of thing, and then they say, well, why do we need this? Why do we need this? And then I say, because if you don't know the emotion of what you're trying to do, then how do you know if you're doing it? Then how do you write? How do you design? I mean, I've had companies that have renamed their company and changed their logo and changed everything based on a messaging session. And had they done the messaging session first, as I always advocate gets done, then you wouldn't have to rename it. You could just name it.
Exactly. Right.
Do you?
100%.
So my question to you is, and it's kind of, why doesn't everybody just do this? I mean, the science is there, the neuroscience is there. Why do you and I face such resistance and over what to me is just obvious? What do you think?
You would think that everybody would do this, and to this day, it continues to puzzle me. I mean, there is literally no shortage of data that talks about emotions driving behavior, persuasion, influence, connecting, whatever the latest buzzword is that, that's alluding to the same thing. There's no shortage of it. And so it blows my mind why this is why I even have to explain it, like why it's not a no-brainer. I think part of it is maybe as far as with executives, because they think if it's feeling, it's fluffy and it doesn't affect my bottom line, and so it doesn't matter. And so it's, there's no place for feelings in business and numbers and whatever.
I know, right?
A lot of those decision makers oftentimes are not sort of touchy-feely people, so their own brains don't work this way. So essentially, I'm asking them to put value on something that they even personally themselves don't sort of connect with, and that's an even harder challenge. But again, I'm grateful to feel like this is shifting. It only took about 20 years, but but I do think that increasingly I come across people where they understand the significance of it, and it continues to resonate with them. So I'm definitely grateful for that.
Yeah, one of my favorite questions to ask companies at trade shows is I go up to them and I say, "What emotion is your brand based on?" And I get people that
I love that.
They just trip over. They cannot come up with an answer to save their life. And I'm like,
God, I have to steal that.
What are you doing here? What would you say that you're doing here? If you don't know the answer to that question, why would you have a marketing program? Why does that exist? Yeah. And they sit there they go, oh, well, our messages, or even better, there's like 3 founders in the room. And I say, what message is the brand based on? And I get 3 different answers. I'm like, oh, I'm sure no one's confused. I'm sure nobody nobody down the chain is confused at all, since we don't have root and anchor. Another thing that I always get in PR is people say, you just deal with the press and objective things. So why do you need to talk about emotions? And I say, here's why. Because public relations is about storytelling. And to tell stories, you need emotions to tell stories. And it's and the storytelling part of it is really important, because if I don't know, and this is just my evolution as a marketing professional, but if I don't know what emotion you're going for in your brand, then the coverage that I pick and the things that I deliver and the outcomes that you think you're paying for, they might all be wrong. I might pick the wrong thing. I might, it's just, to me, it's just so foundational and so important. And like I said, usually I use that as my litmus test. I said, we need to do messaging. Oh no, we're really comfortable with our mission and vision statement. And I said, I don't want that BS. I want an actual message, that resonates with a customer, not something that you designed on a corporate retreat. I mean, I don't, the customer doesn't give a flying fart about your, corporate retreat, vision, mission statement. That stuff's all garbage. I said, I want to know what you mean to them and that kind of stuff. So, how do you like to work on a project like this? How do people engage you, and what is your role in this whole thing?
So first, I like to listen to the stakeholders tell me what they think they're offering, sort of like what you just said about, ask each one, you might get a different answer. And so what needs do they think they're addressing? And why do they think that's even a problem? And why do they feel that their solution works? So really, what do you know about your product and what you think you're doing? And a big part of that, too, is observing how they're presenting. So do they even really believe in what they're saying? So there's a lot of the verbal and the nonverbal. What do you think you're offering? What do you know about it? Like you said, the feeling you're addressing. And how do you sound when you even tell me that? I can't tell you how many times you see executives and they're either too married to their product or their campaign to see objectively that, to see objectively that, hey, this is, there's a problem, or to see that there's an internal voice that's getting in the way of them presenting their best self. How many times I see, the I'm not good enough internally, subconsciously in them coming out, or I'm not really sure about what I'm saying. Even though they're clearly the experts in the room. And so a lot of it is about, if you're the face of this, then let's start with you. And then once we do that, then I do my own sort of emotional processing. And I use my empathy and experience to really try to sit in the seat of the customer and imagine what feelings they'd be bringing to the experience. So I literally close my eyes. I try to be immersive. And then we'll look at the discrepancy and the overlap between our two perspectives, and we're sort of fine-tuned from there to get clear on what you're...
Sure, I'm going to have to cut you off there. We're going to come back. You're listening to Leila right now on May the Best Brand Win and Intertalk Media. Come on back, and we're going to talk about who's winning and losing. We'll see you in a few.
Are you serious about your music? Are you ready to run with the big dogs? The experts at Pitbull Audio have the gear to get you into the game. From leading manufacturers like Mesa Boogie, Fender, Pioneer, and American Audio. To sound your best, you need the best. Pitbull Audio can deliver in rehearsal, on stage, and into the big time. Dropping beats, shredding guitar, or making the crowd roar. Whatever you dream, Pitbull Audio can help make it happen. We are Pitbull Audio. We want you to play it loud. PitbullAudio.com.
This is Jackie Bertoni from Jackie's Groove. Come join me weekly on my journey through the music business as I take you behind the velvet rope, interviewing industry notables such as Al Di Meola, Michael McDonald, and Al Jarreau, to name but a few. Listen to their stories on being in the studios recording #1 hits and onto the stages throughout the globe. Allow me to be your music historian. You can hear me live every Monday at 2 p.m. and every Wednesday at 12 noon Pacific Standard Time, or 24/7 on jackiesgroove.com. Ready to get your groove on?
Hi, I'm Tim Dolbear, the host of Sound Experience on Intertalk Radio. Each week, I talk with top professional audio engineers, producers, musicians, and the manufacturers that make the tools that we use in the studio each and every day. From capturing the perfect take to mastering your final release, and the tools and how the pros use them, we are going to dive deep into their process and learn from their experience. I look forward to you joining us each week on Sound Experience with me, your host, Tim Dolbear.
Make this your vinyl night. I'm John J.R. Robinson, and every week, music creation comes alive through stories, experiences, and sounds when vinyl records filled our hearts and minds. My friends and I share our tips and techniques used in creation of iconic tracks for recording artists such as Michael Jackson, Eric Clapton, Quincy Jones, and Steve Winwood, to name a few. Vinyl has emerged hot, and the soul of vinyl defines art and passion which burns deepest at night. Tune in every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on intertalkradio.com.
May the best brand win with Scott Robertson's Music Biz Marketing Strategies. Now, here's your host, Scott Robertson.
Hey, everybody. It is Friday, and you are super smart because you are listening to May the Best Brand Win on Intertalk Media, the undisputed leader on music biz talk, and I am Scott, your host. I'm hanging with Leila Entezam today. Leila is an expert in using emotional intelligence-centered design and all kinds of psycho stuff. It's awesome. Great to have you on the show, Leila. You having fun so far?
Thank you. I definitely am. Thank you.
Awesome.
Great to be here.
Well, as we like to do here in good old segment 2. So segment 2 is all about, today we're talking about designing with your feelings, and we're going to come back to that. And we're going to give you some of Leila's top EQ designing tips, in the third segment. But for this segment, we're going to talk about what's going on in the world and kind of, see who's winning and losing this week. So without further ado, let's get into that. So this week, a study came out that said, a couple of studies came out that were interesting, but basically talking about the young people, the college students, those darn college students. Social media is one of 5 primary sources now for gathering news among college students. Today's youth are increasingly relying on internet-based technology to gather news, and this is from the Project of Information Literacy. But word of mouth is still one of the most popular ways to learn about the latest happenings. This has been a year-long study from the Project Information Literacy. It reveals that 89% of U.S. college students get at least some of their news during the preceding week from social media. And social media is one of the 5 key pathways to news gathering. Social media was ranked as being second most popular. And discussion with peers was the most popular way to receive news, as 93% of respondents indicate. So this is really interesting. Online newspapers are in there too. I encourage you to look at the whole study. The whole study is really interesting. It's in TechSpot this week, so you can check that out. But I thought, and Facebook was actually, even though we see stories about how the young or college students are really abandoning and leaving Facebook, what was interesting to me was that Facebook was the biggest bar, Snapchat was second, YouTube was third, Instagram is in there, and fourth. You would have thought Instagram would have been higher, and Twitter was actually fifth, and followed by Reddit, LinkedIn, and Pinterest, which is kind of interesting. Again, this is among college students, this is a year-long kind of study. So I think, the reason I bring it up is it's definitely interesting data. There was another study I saw this week that said that college students and young people were less likely to be influenced by false news stories because they don't watch television news. And I thought that there was, it was a little bit of an indictment of television news that was kind of in there. Anyway, Leila, what do you think of all this fun stuff, all this data?
I think that it speaks to the responsibility and the permanence of the content you put in social media. And so that, anyone can post anything. And when you see how impactful and influential it is, increasing the conversation we have about the responsibility of that. And then also being the feeling person, for me, it's nice to see that the number one is still word of mouth. So it is still human engagement. So nice. I definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you got to put social media, in the winning category. All of these networks and social media for winning, for really kind of replacing other news as the key, as a key piece of news, in college student level, age folks' lives. And I think that's kind of an interesting thing to make sure you keep the pulse on. And like I said, I think you got to put all those networks in winning for doing that. And probably, correspondingly, the other study, TV news, just as I mentioned on the show a lot, the young people, they don't watch television. They don't watch. So they don't watch anything on television. Somewhere. Yeah, right. Yeah. They don't watch TV news. They don't watch TV sports. They don't watch TV nothing. They don't that if that device isn't in the house, they could care less.
Right.
And I think that's fascinating. Having I have a college-age son and a high school-aged daughter, and I just happen to notice that they just don't that whatever room that the TV's in, it is not a room that they're ever in. Got to say, from personal experience, that's what I would say. So when you're designing marketing campaigns and say I want to go after the young people, you gotta really kind of rethink what role television's going to play, in that.
Exactly.
Different screens and different things going on. Well, let's move on. Influencer marketing had a little bit of setback this week. The influencer Luca Sabat was sued on Tuesday for failing to live up to an agreement to promote Snap spectacles on his Instagram account. So Sabat was photographed in September at events with Kourtney Kardashian. Awesome. And people recently reported that the pair split after briefly dating. And he appears on the Freeform series Grownish, and he has 1.4 million Instagram followers. Now, what's fascinating about this is now he's being sued for this category called failure to influence. Failure, really, it's just failure to live up to, elements in the dude's contract, dude. Yeah, he was to be paid $60,000 with 45 grand to be paid up front. And the suit is seeking reimbursement of the $45,000 plus another $45,000 in additional damages because he didn't do the right number of Instagram stories and posts and this kind of thing. Now, to me, there's two things that make this losing. One, the losing of the fact that everybody that's in this story, you look at this and go, it raises people's awareness to the fact that this stuff is just blatantly paid for, and there's no way that it doesn't impact credibility, and there's no way that it doesn't seep into that. And not just for him, but for any of these influencer things, which is what I've always said on this program. I said, influencer marketing, you have to be careful, because if you're paying huge sums of money for people to do stuff and they're not doing it genuinely, then you have a problem if people find out that you have paid them to do so. The credibility and the influence that you're trying to buy can burn up like paper right in front of your face, and so to me, I know it's a big buzzword and everybody in marketing wants to jump on influencer marketing. I say do so with a hell of a lot of caution for a lot of different reasons. I did a couple shows on influencer marketing. Go check those out. I would definitely say every time a story like this comes out and it becomes, then it puts the dollar amounts and what, it basically publishes the contract that none of these companies wanted you to see on a bunch of different news sources. So I'm going to put influencer marketing in a big losing, and certainly this guy, Luca Sabat, is certainly going to be in court and paying some money, and he's getting all kinds of negative press and variety. But what do you think about that one, Leila?
I think it's spot on in terms of it's the authenticity. So again, if you go back to the first story about, hey, the number one way was word of mouth, so human connection. By that same token, you can't fake the human connection. So the lack of authenticity, if you're paying me to endorse something, that's not always the case, because there are cases where the user does in fact believe in what they're getting paid for, but without the authenticity, and then also just the responsibility. If you're paying someone, the responsibility on the part of the organizations. You're paying someone just based on the number of followers they may have, but what do you know about their sort of maturity in engaging with them? If it was any other company you were going to engage in, how much due diligence would you do to sort of be able to say, are you able to deliver? Again, I'm not saying Luca Sabat is immature, has nothing to do with him personally, but as a generalization, is this person able to hold up their end of the bargain, irrespective of whether it's a person or an organization or whatever the case may be?
Yeah, I agree with you, absolutely. And, I didn't even know when I first saw this lawsuit, and they called it failure to influence, like that's a thing. And I was like,
right.
I didn't know that you could say that was like an infraction, right? In fact, failure to influence, you can like be sued for not influencing people.
Right.
That's a thing now. Like the failure to failure to influence. I was like, yikes. I didn't even, that's just interesting to me. Well, I think we both think that one's in losing.
Right.
Yeah, please.
I think it's
Go
just
ahead.
a new term for saying you basically didn't hold up your end of the contract.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, they should just call it breach of contract, right? Failure to influence. What? So anyway, that was interesting. All right, cool. Firmly in losing, we agree. Let's talk about Spotify. Spotify made money. They announced their third quarter earnings yesterday, and they had growth in their paid subscribers and users, and they made their first ever quarterly profit. So Spotify made money, and yet investors still weren't thrilled because, investors. Yeah, I mean, how are you gonna please investors? That's what I say. But come on, I mean, Spotify has been losing money for all of our lifetimes, except for this quarter right here. And I think that alone deserves some kind of a yay or a shout. If you're listening, Spotify, good job. Way to make your first ever quarterly profit. I mean, investors need to, seriously. Did you know there's now 191 million people who use Spotify each month? And that's a jump of 28% over last year. And then they're doing really, really well, which I didn't even realize, but they're doing really, really well in emerging markets like Latin America. So really kind of fascinating. I certainly didn't think of that as being like an emerging market for them, but hey, apparently so. And let's not forget that if Spotify dies and goes away, then there is basically just one music service left. And that's the music service from the big company that owns all the phones and all the computers in the world and it has $1 trillion sitting in the bank, earning interest. Compound interest on $1 trillion is a lot of money, as it turns out. So that's I think Spotify needs to exist just so there is competition. There's something, and obviously another revenue stream for artists, which isn't the worst thing in the world. I don't know. What do you think about the Spotify news this week? Lots of different Spotify news, but what do you think of that?
I think it speaks to how much companies today are competing against these sort of unicorn expectations of hey, I'm providing market competition, or hey, I finally made a profit, and yet you still expect more because you hear all these stories of major things happening, and you think, well, why didn't it happen to Spotify? And yet it's funny that when it happens to another organization that may have, like if you look at Tesla and how much trouble they'll be in. Oh, but if the trend about Tesla is exciting or the buzz around it is, well, then we forgive them for that. So I think two things. One, look at how investor expectations are, and then two, look the influence of buzz, the feeling buzz around what your company is, and how that lets you get away with stuff or not.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. I think we're both going to put Spotify in winning. I say.
I agree.
Spotify should get the win just for being able to crack that, and show that they had a profit. I mean, that's just awesome to me. But
do winners have a little, a hand clap sound effect or something?
We're going to add that next season. We're going to look at the budget. We're going to look closely at the budget. We're going to see if we can add some sound effects. I'm sure Paul could do it. Paul's probably sitting there looking for a way to add some kind of crazy sound effects. Then it's going to be like the, the Uncle Bob and Pluto show or something with like all kinds of crazy. It's going to be like an old time radio show pretty soon. Well, cool. Here's a good one I wanted to talk to you about. So a story came out this week. Let's see. It was on futurity.org. And basically it says that neutral fact checks may not sway voters to abandon false beliefs based on inaccurate information, according to a new study. So if you're having a political argument about voter fraud, you'd think that citing a nonpartisan neutral source like Snopes or PolitiFact might be the best way to correct misinformation. But according to a new study, reading correct information from fact-checking organizations did not persuade either Republicans or Democrats to abandon their beliefs, even if proven false, about election fraud. So I'm going to turn it over to our resident psychologist, psychiatrist, mind melder extraordinaire, Leila. Explain why people are so friggin' stupid and cannot, why fact checks don't matter. Go ahead.
So I'm totally unsurprised by that, because essentially you see what you want to see. And so if I want to believe that whatever the news is I heard is or isn't true, then when you give me something to negate that, I'm going to, in my mind, find a way to sort of dismiss that. So we're masters at turning things around to be what we want. Do I have time to give you a really quick example?
Yeah. We got 2 minutes still.
So a quick example is that, let's say, for example, I say, you know what, I will never date a smoker. And then Mr. Dreamy comes along and he happens to smoke. So my brain will say, well, you said you don't date smokers, but he's a smoker, but you just adore him. So I say, well, you know, he's going to quit. He said he's going to quit. And so then my brain says, oh, okay, well, then I guess I can get along with that. And so I guess that'll be okay. And so it lets me reduce the tension with a decision I made that's against what I said I was going to do. So you gave me this news, and I'm like, I totally endorse it. And then you give me stats to say why, actually, that's really not the truth. No, I'm sure there's something wrong with your stats, because, I'm believing what I need to believe.
It's so, it's so interesting. That your eyes actually just kind of, I always tell people, I say your eyes project more than they see, and
right.
Obviously all the neuroscience in the world, shows that we're creatures that run around kind of completely driven by emotion, but that really is uncomfortable for us. So we create this kind of magical house of facts that support our emotions.
Right. Love it.
It's wild. It really is. Well, I think with the election, coming up, and obviously, just so much political communication. People always ask me, they say, what do you think about all the communications around politics? And I say, I don't think it does that much. I say, people have made up their minds long before, and they're, even if you flat out just prove it wrong, they're gonna find some way to vote the way they previously were going to vote anyway. I don't think there's that many moderates. Well, we only got a few seconds left, but that's an interesting round of winning and losing. And in just a second here, there you go. You guys are tuned to May the Best Brand Win on Intertalk Media, the undisputed leader in music biz talk. Come on back, and Leila is going to give us some awesome tips for designing EQ into your design. Talk to you in a few.
Hi, I'm Tim Dolbear, the host of Sound Experience on Intertalk Radio. Each week, I talk with top professional audio engineers, producers, musicians, and the manufacturers that make the tools that we use in the studio each and every day. From capturing the perfect take to mastering your final release, and the tools and how the pros use them, we are going to dive deep into their process and learn from their experience. I look forward to you joining us each week on Sound Experience with me, your host, Tim Dolbear.
Are you serious about your music? Are you ready to run with the big dogs? The experts at Pitbull Audio have the gear to get you into the game. From leading manufacturers like Mesa Boogie, Fender, Pioneer, and American Audio. To sound your best, you need the best. Pitbull Audio can deliver in rehearsal, on stage, and into the big time. Dropping beats, shredding guitar, or making the crowd roar. Whatever you dream, Pitbull Audio can help make it happen. We are Pitbull Audio. We want you to play it loud. PitbullAudio.com.
Make this your vinyl night. I'm John J.R. Robinson, and every week, music creation comes alive through stories, experiences, and sounds when vinyl records filled our hearts and minds. My friends and I share our tips and techniques used in creation of iconic tracks for recording artists such as Michael Jackson, Eric Clapton, Quincy Jones, and Steve Winwood, to name a few. Vinyl has emerged hot, and the soul of vinyl defines art and passion which burns deepest at night. Tune in every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on InterTalkRadio.com.
This is Jackie Bertoni from Jackie's Groove. Come join me weekly on my journey through the music business as I take you behind the velvet rope, interviewing industry notables such as Al Di Meola, Michael McDonald, and Al Jarreau, to name but a few. Listen to their stories on being in the studios recording #1 hits and onto the stages throughout the globe. Allow me to be your music historian. You can hear me live every Monday at 2 p.m. and every Wednesday at 12 noon Pacific Standard Time or 24/7 on jackiesgroove.com. Ready to get your groove on?
May the best brand win with Scott Robertson's Music Biz Marketing Strategies. Now, here's your host, Scott Robertson.
Hey, everybody. It is still Friday, and you are still tuned to May the Best Brand Win on Intertalk Media, the undisputed leader in music biz talk. I am Scott, your host, that guy was just talking about. And hanging with us has been the goddess of all feelings, Leila Entezam. Leila, how are you doing? How's the show been for you so far?
Fantastic. With an introduction like that, how could I not be?
Do you change your business card to goddess of all feely stuff?
I'm
Goddess
on
of
it right
feelings?
now.
Goddess of feelings comes through.
Right.
You know, I feel like I feel like I've been able to get some stuff off and really share today. I feel like I've really been able to grow as a person, to be honest. I mean, you know, so it's been great. It's I feel good. You know, as James Brown once said, I feel good. I knew that I would. Well, cool. I wanted to, before we get in, now you're going to give us some awesome tips. I'm excited about that. But I wanted to just come back to a couple of things that we didn't get a chance to finish off well in the first segment. So we're talking about, emotion-driven design and that kind of thing. And I wanted to talk about Weight Watchers. So Weight Watchers, sort of, you know, as part of this kind of thing that I've been calling brand truncation, they're just going with WW. Right? They're going to, because they said they didn't want to focus on weight anymore. They're like Weight Watchers, and yet they don't want to focus on weight because they're like, well, no, we're more about like wellness and like, and healthy stuff. And we're not just about, we're not just about that single aspect of weight. Kind of like Dunkin' Donuts says, we're not just about donuts. We have coffee, we have muffins, we have other things. So just from an emotional design standpoint, what's going on here with the truncation and just going to the WW? You know, what do you think of that, first of all?
That's a great question. I do think that I agree with your label of the truncation. I think it's part of a greater trend of simplifying, downsizing, less stuff, less clutter, which I actually love because I'm a minimalist myself in a lot of respects. And I think people are just so overloaded that it's necessary. So it's this sleekness and the lessness that's so trendy today. For Weight Watchers in particular, I wonder if it's also tied to Oprah being on board with them, that you want to make it more about wellness and holistic and acceptance of who you are. And so moving away from focusing on weight.
Yeah, that's what they said in the statement, that they want to go with like just WW, and they're going to take their logo and they're going to shrink that sucker down to just like two W's, you know, which is weird because when we see two W's together, we kind of expect there to be a third one and a dot, you know, www dot something, you know, it's just or I think World War for some reason, you know, WW. I don't know. I think World War, and I'm just like, but that's just me. That's just me and my crazy feelings. Well, that's one thing I wanted to bring up. Another thing was, a lot of my clients and a lot of the listeners of the show, it's all about the music industry. And, the music industry is almost entirely led by emotion. Yet the design in a lot of its marketing isn't really on the cutting emotional edge. They're still talking about kind of speeds and feeds. They're still talking about noise gates on their, pickups for guitars and things. And only a few companies have really made that jump to really start talking about what to me is one of the most emotional subjects that you can discuss, which is playing a musical instrument. What do you recommend to help the music companies out there tap into the massive emotions and the emotional story that's found in playing musical instruments?
I feel like the campaign, quote unquote, in terms of images for a lot of the things in music and entertainment in general seem to focus on sex and drugs. And there's so much more to music than that you have this wealth of things that you could tap into. So the power of the instrument, the power in moving lyrics, the spectrum of emotions that music taps into, and just using sex and drugs is a missed opportunity to connect to listeners in other ways. So a simple suggestion is to just start by expanding the images that you're using to have them be outside of the sex and drugs that are able to then tap into eliciting other emotions.
Yeah, Fender just came out with a study, and they said that according to their research, 54% of players of their guitars, new players, were women. So, so it's like if you have an old ad that has a picture of a very attractive woman, holding a guitar and that kind of thing, then, and they don't, I'm not necessarily saying they do that. They're more guilty of doing, like I said, what I call kind of speeds and feeds advertising, where they just talk about product bullet points out the wazoo. And people, like musicians, will talk intricate gear nonsense till they're blue in the face, right? Mm-hmm. But I mean, believe me, you want to have a good conversation. You sit down with two guitarists and have them and they start. You don't even think you're still in America. you won't even. I mean, they start speaking a language that you're like, I'm sorry, what did you just say? What what are you talking about? And musicians can all kind of understand it within each other, but like my wife is like, I have no idea what you're talking about when you talk about that stuff. So I think. Don't you think there's a great opportunity for music companies to talk about their products and how it helps people maybe unlock some of their emotions and like the reasons that you play music and things like that, as opposed to kind of just falling back to we have this great new guitar and then here's a million bullet points about all the stuff it does.
Absolutely, and music more than so many other arenas. It's just sort of boiling over with emotions that you can tap into. It's unbelievable.
It's so true. It's so true. Well, I just wanted to make sure we had a chance to hit that, but so we don't run out of time, and we got about 10 minutes left, so we're good. I wanted to make sure that you could leave the audience with some tips for doing your best kind of emotional intelligence design. So, what's your first tip, Leila? Yeah.
So if you want to engage the emotions of your clients, you have to start by understanding your own emotions. And so I would say there's 4 things that you can do to increase your own awareness and then your client's emotional engagement. So the first thing I would say is increasing your own emotional awareness. So meditating, journaling, reading self-reflection books, which is not necessarily the same thing as reading self-help books. So self-help may be a struggle I'm going through. Self-reflection is I'm just trying to understand, what do I do? Why do I do it? A couple of good books in that bucket are Buddha's Brain and Mind Sight by Dan Siegel. Cool. So for me, my way of doing that is like I said in the beginning, I keep a very small private practice. And that's a major way that essentially every week I force myself to be deeply immersed in feelings. So, number 1, increase your emotional awareness. Number 2,
nice. Oh, I was going to say real quick. So, are you a doctor? Are you Dr. Leila?
No, I'm a licensed mental health therapist.
Cool. Could we, Dr. Phil's not a doctor either. Could we call you Dr. Leila?
Sure.
Dr. Leila, you got to get in your canoe and row. This is your canoe. You got to get in there and you got to get the paddle and you got to row. Anyway, go ahead. Right. Sorry. My poor Dr. Phil imitation coming in there. But what is your second tip for increasing your EQ design skillage?
So once you are increasing your emotional awareness, your next step is now to exercise that emotional muscle to strengthen the pathways in your brain. So any experience in your brain, any learning in your brain is from these pathways that you think of it sort of like as highways. So if I just traveled this road once, it's just a dirt road. Whereas if I continue, then I sort of blaze a trail through it. So you start by having more awareness of your feelings. Now you have to actually exercise that emotional muscle. As you increase your awareness, now you have to work on expressing them, identifying them. Hey, I'm feeling this. And so you start to see that also in the language that people use. People more immersed in their feelings use different vocabulary than people that aren't.
Absolutely. And right here, we got to talk about the difference between men and women, right? Because, do women do this better than men? Just flat out. And you can tell me. I'm just curious.
The reason I can't say yes is because I see men and women both capable of doing it equally, not as effectively, or very effectively. So I can't say, maybe innately a woman may be sort of easier to connect to her feelings or more inclined to connect to her feelings, but that never, in my opinion, means a man can't or that a woman must or expected to. So, like, for me, it takes cognitive effort and exercise and practice to stay very immersed in feelings. I had, a decade that I wasn't so connected to my feelings.
Interesting. And what about, like, psychological personality type? Are some people more prone, like your ENTJ people, or how you set those people up on the scale, and we all had to do those at work at some point, so people would know how they could talk to us and stuff. Now, does that have any kind of bearing on it, or is that all just work nonsense that they make you do because they can't figure out what else to do with you?
So my personal belief is that it's all the same engine. We all have the same brain in terms of sort of, at a high level. So everyone has the feelings, whether you're ENFJ or INFP, whatever it is, that just means you manifest it differently, process it differently, but we all have it. Those are innate traits you can't get away from. So we all get sad. Our awareness of the sadness, what we do with it, what it looks like is different, but the capacity to get sad, barring, maybe things like autism, things like that, is there for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, cool. I wanted to delve in those areas. So your first tip was to increase your emotional awareness. Your second one is to exercise those emotional muscles. What is your third tip, Leila?
So once you do 1 and 2, now you increase your exposure to diverse experiences and audiences. So what this does is allows you to have more empathy. So an example is you can start using Groupons to try new things. You can go to different meetups. Something I have with some friends of mine, we started something called Dig Deep Dinners. So we pick a topic we're interested in, we invite some people from the community, and we learn about whatever it is. So we've had people from the visually impaired, we've had people from the Native American culture, we've had Jewish educators, we've had artists, just something we want to learn about. So as you increase your exposure, that makes you more one with others, and it creates more, diversity, more experience, and that allows you to, again, have more empathy.
It's so important. I always tell clients, and I've said it many times on this show, that the number one thing that is missing from modern marketing today is empathy. There is just the audience is just something, is just a target to shoot at, and I always try, and I've always tried to say that if you have empathy for the audience, then you won't do stuff. Remember, if you're trying to build relationships, if you are thinking about them first, then you won't do some of this creepy stuff that the government is ultimately going to have to get involved in. The government's going to have to come in and police marketing. They don't want to, but they're going to have to, because marketing cannot control itself, from using our data in all kinds of creepy ways. I had a guy that hit me on LinkedIn yesterday and said, Scott, would you like to know about this software that can predict the behavior of your customers so that you can sell to them? And I bounced back and I said, no. I said, what I'd like is, I said, no, I don't want that because it's creepy and I'm in the relationship building business. I said, and you should stop it because the government's going to be coming for you. I said, how do you not see that the government's coming for you? You got to see it. There's a new law in 2020, the California Privacy Data Initiative, did a whole show on it. It's really important. You can bet your butt that Congress is getting ready to set up its own GDPR, and that thing is going to make GDPR look like it was written by the Girl Scouts. I mean, it is absolutely going to have some teeth, and they're coming after Google and Facebook, and they're coming after all of these companies because, and the reason they're coming after them is these companies don't start with empathy. These companies say, well, we can, but they never stop to think that we should. It's really, really important. And I agree with everything that you're saying. What's your fourth tip?
Okay, so fourth tip, in your marketing efforts, don't just look for ROIs and numbers. Ask about the feelings that you're creating. So literally ask people, how do you feel about my product, my